So good morning, everyone. My name is Christine. I'm Professor of Sustainability Science at Lund University, and I have been an academic advisor to the IDGs from the very beginning and also even before, similar like Frederick, before they were called the IDGs. And my working place, Luxus, Lund University Center for Sustainability Studies, is one of the founding organizations of the IDG. And in the next 60 minutes, Jan and myself will give you a very small glimpse into the link between inner and outer transformation for sustainability and elaborate on the related theory of change. So the overall objective then of this session is to enhance understanding of the theory of change that underlies the importance of human inner dimensions and the IDGs for accelerating sustainability. Okay. So our hope is that this session will enable you to present the rationale for the IDGs, so a clear reasoning of their importance and associated inner-outer transformation processes. And in addition, we hope that the session will help you to become more familiar with related theories and science that support the rationale and the appropriate implementation of the IDGs to nurture well-being and transformation across individual, collective, and planetary and systems levels. Mm-hmm. So based on these objectives, the session is structured as follows. So after this short introduction, I will then give you the very broad rationale and theory of change from a sustainability science perspective. So we had some introduction already before, and I will just give you the perspective from a sustainability science perspective. And then next, Jan will present the IDG-specific theory of change to then help you understand how the IDGs contribute to the broader and the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. And then there will be an exercise in the end, similar to the one that we did before, but then you had a lot of input, so we can repeat it and see how it goes then, to help you digest the different inputs and learn together. Okay, and there is also room for questions and answers. Okay, any questions so far? No? Good. So let's begin with the first part. So let's jump into the content. So in the Ambassador Program pre-arrival preparation document, very complicated name, Frederick, there is a list of 4 videos, including 2 in which I present the theory of change. And several talked to me already that you have seen it. So the shorter one is from a recent presentation that I gave for the IDG Hub in Ireland. And I actually wear my pajamas underneath, but you don't know that. And the second is from a presentation at Stanford University, which is a bit older. Okay. And instead of repeating the same content here, which would be completely useless, right? The next few slides will outline what I consider the most important key messages, so kind of compressed summary of what is really important from a sustainability science perspective. And after this, I will give you an overview and explanation of the storyline that I use from the Ireland presentation, so that you will then be able to adapt the storyline to your context and target groups. Okay? So that's the idea. So let's start. So I have a total of 3 key messages, and then there comes some content behind them, to explain them. So in simple terms, there are 3 key messages. The first one is that our current approaches are insufficient. Always important to state the obvious. In fact, our current approaches to sustainability science, practice, and education have not catalyzed the necessary change. And we are experiencing an ecological catastrophe together with a worldwide mental health crisis, poverty, and political turmoil. And this is because current approaches are based on a mistaken understanding that sustainability challenges are external threats and crises. Okay? And since the way we define problems automatically determines our responses, we address them with external, mainly technical solutions. Okay, so there's a clear logic of what we are doing. We define them as external, consequently we address them through external measures. In addition, current approaches are based on the so-called information or knowledge deficit model. So the knowledge deficit model argues that if we could only provide all of the information we have to all of the people, things will be solved. That's the idea, and this is on this basis we operate. Okay? However, we know from science that this is not correct. Still, we operate based on this understanding. And finally, current approaches have not catalyzed necessary change because there is a gap between what I call the sustainability and the consciousness communities. So in other words, there's a gap between the work of professionals, and I mean scholars, educators, practitioners, who focus on sustainability on the one hand and who focus on personal development on the other hand. And this is hampering progress. So as a result, our professional and technological capacities have been increasing exponentially, but our ability to use them wisely has not. Okay, second key message. The second key message is that there is a new field that addresses these current gaps. So in fact, in recent years, a new field has emerged that looks at the interface between inner development, behavior, culture, and system transformation. And this new field has many different names. It's called inner transformation for sustainability, or it's called integrated inner-outer transformation, or a term which is more recent and which I really like, it's called existential sustainability, because it's about asking the existential questions. And since sustainability science is about addressing existential threats, it makes a lot of sense. And although it is still new, the field, today its importance is increasingly acknowledged by key players such as the UNDP, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, who in their last reports recognized the field, and also the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES. And they will have a report at the end of the year, and in each chapter they acknowledge this new field. And also the traditional wisdom, the wisdom traditions in relation to your question before. So the field has contributed to important advancements. And here are some of them. So it has, for instance, shown that the threats and crises we are facing are, in fact, a reflection of an inner human crisis. And it has highlighted that this inner crisis, and Jan referred to it before, is based on an increasing separation or disconnection from self, others, and nature. And importantly, that this disconnection is an integral element of modern life. So it's built into our culture, in our institutions, in our political system. And related research has also shown that human inner dimensions, which include or which we define as our individual and collective beliefs, values, worldviews, and associated inner capacities and skills, are deep leverage points for change. I know scientists like definitions, but I find this definition really important because only if we understand what inner dimensions are and what the different components are, we can actually address them. And there are different ways to address the different components. And obviously the IDGs relate to this part of the definition. And finally, studies in the field have identified how to address inner dimensions across individual, collective, and system levels in an integrated way. So not looking at them in isolation, but in an integrated way. So then I come to the third key message. So on the basis of what I explained before, the third key message is that there is a growing body of scientific knowledge that is backing up work on the IDGs. This means that there is a growing community of scholars who, together with educators and practitioners, have created a field of change and communities of practice that support the shift towards a new sustainability story or a new sustainability paradigm or narrative. You can call it in different ways. But it's a new story, a new understanding of what sustainability is, what sustainability challenges are, and what the solutions are. And they provide concrete input as to how more integrated measures, in other words, measures that link inner and outer dimensions of change, can be supported across sectors and scales. And in this context, there are some key models or theories that can support related work. So the why, the what, and also the how in relation to the IDGs and how that supports the SDGs. And in this context, there are some key models and theories that can support related work coming out of sustainability science. And they include the Imagine framework, and you had a related reading in your document, the inner-outer transformation model, the mind sustainability nexus, and the education tree for inner-outer transformation. So I have illustrated those 4 models here. So these 4 models of frameworks are the ones that I just mentioned on the previous slide. Unfortunately, I don't have Jakob to work with me on these, but then they would be a bit nicer. But at least that's as good as it can get when you work with scientists. So these frameworks, they can be applied obviously together with related approaches and methodologies that are used in diverse sustainability leadership courses, such as the 3 spheres of transformation, developed by Karen O'Brien, integral theory, developed by Ken Wilber, Theory U, which was mentioned before by Sharma, the work that reconnects by Joanna Macy, or Immunity to Change by Bob Keegan. So obviously these things work together. They are not in competition to each other. They support each other. They have different functions when you design something. And obviously there are also targeted methods, for instance, for Aconcagua, you mentioned ACT, right? So the Imagine framework, just like one sentence about each of these models. The Imagine framework, which is here on the left, identifies the core characteristics of integrated inner-outer transformation, including the ontological and epistemological grounding and how this should translate into practice. So it basically helps us imagine a new narrative and new ways of doing things. And we actually wrote that because there was so much misunderstanding about the field that we felt we really need to clarify what this is about. It's not separate from the outer, it's integrated in our outer transformation, and we wanted to put things right in relation to the criticism that we saw exist in the field, and that was the result. The mind sustainability nexus, this one, which I developed with Jamie, explains the links that exist between our minds or our inner lives and sustainability challenges. And it indicates how we can basically move from this vicious cycle of basically destruction to this virtual cycle of improving well-being of individual, collective, and planetary well-being. And then on this basis, the inner-outer transformation model, that's a simplified version of it, explains in more detail how inner and outer processes are interconnected. And it identifies 5 clusters of transformative capacities that I see as a kind of scientific counterpart of the IDGs. So it supports the IDG framework quite strongly and defines complementary ways in which they can be addressed across scales. And then finally, here to the right, the inner-outer transformation tree. That was, I think, not in your readings. That's why I put it a bit bigger so that you can actually read something. So it provides guidance for designing courses that aim to accelerate sustainability and regeneration through linking inner and outer transformation. So we have 4 essential pieces, which are illustrated here, which actually match the key characteristics of the Matchin framework. And the model summarizes the outcomes of several years of research, of evaluations of different kinds of courses, including the IDG Global Leadership for Sustainable Development program. And you will hear more about that program later from Åsa. So if you plan to implement any kind of leadership or capacity development in the field, so make sure to check out this tree. Okay, so these were the 3 key messages. And then you heard the presentations, which were in your reading material. But there are obviously, of course, many different storylines that you can then decide to use in order to present for your specific audience and for your specific context. So you will have to adapt it at what terms you use. And what scientific facts you want to add depends on each individual case. So I would be each time, it's hardly possible to use the same presentation for the same target, for different target groups or contexts. So I would adjust them each time slightly to actually speak to the specific audience. So I now took the slides from the Ireland presentation, and I will just give you a sort of storyline, why I did there what I did. So in my case, I found it particularly useful to start with a simple introduction of sustainability. Whilst most people can talk about it and work in related fields, very few are able to define what sustainability is actually about. But if it's understood correctly, it presents a beautiful vision to live by and work for. And so it means that it opens the opportunity to actually connect to the audience and ask important existential questions. So if they understand the link between existential threats, threats that threaten humanity and the planet, and asking existential questions, it's a good entry point because it allows people to reflect on or be reminded of their intrinsic values, and the possibility to be part and contribute to something bigger. So it can actually be a motivation, a force, so to say. Then, once I have given sort of a beautiful vision of how life could be, I then contrast this vision with current reality, which is characterized by the increasing exploitation and exhaustion of self, others, and nature. And if I put it this way, if I say it's about exploitation and exhaustion of myself, others, and nature, then people can easily recognize examples from their own life. It's quite easy. So just this kind of formulation, saying it's about really exhausting ourselves, others, and the planet, people can connect to that because most people feel quite exhausted. But they are seldom aware of the fact that what they experience individually actually is connected to a much broader issue, and that this disconnection or alienation is actually the root cause of all kinds of sustainability challenges, what we call today's polycrisis. So on the one hand, we have this polycrisis with interconnected sustainability challenges, but we have one meta-crisis that sort of underlies all of those. And yeah, so it underlies climate change, biodiversity loss, ill health, poverty, inequality, politic trauma, you name it. Okay, and then present, so after these 2 steps, I tend to present hands-on examples, citations, illustrations, etc., and invite participants to explore existing questions to support self-reflection and embodied understanding. So why? If you recall what I mentioned before about the 3 key messages, that's just because we know that information alone will not change anything. And we as sustainability scientists have done that for too many years already, standing in front of people, giving facts, and people leave are completely depressed. What's the point? It's completely useless. So we really need to feel reality in our hearts and bones, in every single cell of our body, and allow it to be here, to be with us and stay with us for a while. And it's only then that I provide the scientific input that is needed to ensure an in-depth understanding of how inner development, the IDGs, and outer transformation are connected and how they have to be addressed in combination. So also pointing out that really working on the IDG separate from the SDG misses the point and can be even harmful. And since the ultimate aim is to support action taking, it is then of utmost importance to provide some practical input as to how transformative and also ethical change, and we had this issue before, can be supported across all sectors and scales. So again, it's the individual, the collective, working with organizations, working with systems. And it involves supporting a narrative shift, that's sort of the cultural level, the collective level. It's about changing communities of practice, also the collective level, and systemic institutionalization of inner dimensions in all existing sectors, mechanisms, and structures. There is no single sector that would not have to do that. And institutionalization or mainstreaming means we have to revise every single thing that we are doing. In that sense, inner transformation is not different to any other cross-cutting topic. If it's gender or another cross-cutting topic which we had to integrate in our current systems, it's the same thing. We have to revise everything from vision statements to operational tools, to how we run meetings. We have to revise everything in order to take this new aspect into account. But independent then of the particular storyline that you will choose for your context and your target groups, it's crucial to avoid supporting despair, anxiety, inaction, polarization. So we have to make biggest effort to move away from that and instead address... Sorry?
We're doing great there.
And instead, what we have to do is, of course, we have to address the urgent needs. We cannot forget about addressing the urgent needs. We have to do that. But at the same time, we also have to address the root causes of today's polycrisis. So we have to support in the best possible way reconnection, hope, cooperation through integrated approaches. And as ambassadors, in case that we want to use that as our name, or, well, for people wanting to go out and support this movement, because that is a movement, right? The movement of linking inner development and outer development for transformation. It also means that we must continuously question and challenge our own ways of being, thinking and acting in the world to ensure that we actually embody the change that we want to see. And that's a really important point. I think also these 3 days hopefully help us reflect about that we question how we actually think, are, and act on a constant basis, because we are living culture. So probably every single step you take is in a way an expression of the current unsustainable culture. And if we don't do this, even the most well-intended engagement might do more harm than good, or just lead to negative consequences. And with this, I thank you.